I came to the three-sun planet. Alien women surrounded me and looked at me with curiosity. The traveler stepped off the strange, humming ship onto the soil of a world that seemed to exist in three different lights at once. Three suns hung in the sky, each casting its own color across the alien horizon. One glowed amber like fire, another white like moonlight, and the last shimmered violet, mysterious and deep. Their overlapping lights painted the land in surreal beauty, bathing the floating cities, towering crystal forests, and shadowed valleys in a kaleidoscope of color. He inhaled the sharp, metallic air, feeling it tingle against his lungs. Every step seemed heavier here, though the gravity felt almost gentle. The ground beneath him shimmered faintly, as if the soil itself had a heartbeat. This world, the three-sun planet, was unlike anything he had seen in the countless galaxies he had traveled. And yet he felt the weight of being utterly alone. As he walked forward, the city began to rise before him. Platforms floated in the air, linked by thin bridges of light. The architecture was strange, both organic and crystalline, like trees carved from glass, twisting upward into the sky. He could see towers that seemed alive, shimmering with colors that responded to the three suns. Then he noticed them. The first woman appeared at the edge of a platform. Her skin gleamed faintly under the suns like polished stone. Her eyes, larger than any human's, reflected the three colors above. She didn't speak but tilted her head, observing him. Her curiosity was undeniable. Soon others appeared, emerging from shadowed corners, from behind crystal pillars and across the bridges. Each one moved with grace, almost floating, yet their presence was grounded, magnetic. They surrounded him slowly, silently, forming a circle. He could feel their gazes like a gentle weight pressing against his mind. The traveler swallowed, unsure how to respond. He wanted to speak, but no words formed. Their beauty was otherworldly, yes, but it was more than that. There was intelligence, judgment, and something deeper, something that made his heart quicken and his body tense. Every instinct told him both to step back and to reach forward at the same time. One of the women, taller than the rest and wrapped in robes of silver light, moved closer. When she extended her hand toward him, a pulse of energy ran through the air. He felt it in his chest, a warmth, a thrum, like a heartbeat not his own. He reached out instinctively but stopped before touching her. The women whispered then, not in words but in thoughts. Images and feelings invaded his mind. He saw glimpses of crystal forests that sang under the violet sun, rivers of light twisting and turning over the floating platforms, and shadowed figures moving beneath the city. He felt fear, curiosity, longing, and a strange sense of destiny, all at once. "Who are they?" he whispered to himself, but the voice seemed small and fragile in the strange, humming atmosphere. The women did not answer. They did not need to. Every movement, every glance, every tilt of their heads communicated what words could never hold. He noticed one woman in particular. Her hair fell like liquid silver, her eyes reflecting all three suns at once. When she looked at him, the world seemed to slow. He felt his own thoughts scatter like leaves in a wind. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, as if she could see everything within him, his fears, his regrets, and the faint hope that had carried him across the stars. Despite the awe, he felt a ripple of danger. This planet was beautiful but not gentle. Shadows clung to the edges of the floating city, moving as if they had minds of their own. The energy from the women seemed both protective and threatening, as if they could shape reality itself with a thought. He realized that his survival depended on understanding them, on earning their trust, or perhaps on learning to control the strange energy awakening within him. As he took a cautious step forward, the silver-haired woman extended her hand again. This time he dared to reach for it. The moment their fingers almost touched, a sharp vibration shot through the air. He stumbled back and the world around him shifted. The women vanished, just like that, without a sound, without a warning. The glowing city remained, bathed in the three suns, but the presence of the women was gone. In their place was a faint, glowing mark on his chest, a pulse of light that throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The traveler pressed his hand to it. The energy felt alive, like a memory or a warning. He had been marked. He did not understand how or why, but he knew that nothing would ever be the same. Something had awakened in him, something that tied his fate to this planet and its mysterious guardians. The city felt empty now, the silence almost unbearable. But in the shadows he sensed movement, shapes that slipped between the light, darker than the crystal structures themselves. He strained his eyes, trying to see them clearly, but they melted into the shimmering landscape. He took another step, the pulse of energy in his chest growing stronger. The ground beneath him hummed faintly, as if recognizing the bond between him and the vanished women. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard a soft echo, a whisper of laughter, a sigh, a call. He could not tell which. The traveler realized then that curiosity alone would not guide him. He needed understanding, patience, and courage. Every choice here had consequences he could not yet predict. And yet, despite the fear, there was a flicker of hope, a possibility that connection, understanding, and perhaps even love could exist in this alien world. He wandered through the city, moving cautiously along the crystal bridges. The platforms seemed endless, stretching into misted horizons. Light danced on the surfaces, reflecting in patterns that almost seemed like writing. He traced them with his fingers, feeling the hum of power beneath his touch. Night, or some equivalent in a three-sun world, fell unevenly, a dance of shadows and overlapping lights. He found a platform that jutted high above the others and climbed to its edge. Below, the city's floating lights glimmered like stars trapped on Earth, but brighter alive. Somewhere beneath, hidden in shadow, the shapes moved again. The feeling of being watched was constant. Then he saw her again, the silver-haired woman. She appeared on a distant platform, her gaze fixed on him. Her presence sent a rush of warmth through him, both terrifying and comforting. She lifted a hand slowly, as if signaling him, but before he could respond, a shadow detached from the ground beneath her and moved toward him. A dark, formless figure with a presence that chilled his blood. The traveler froze, unsure whether to flee or step forward. His instincts told him danger lurked, but his heart drew him to her. The pulse of energy in his chest throbbed faster, stronger. He felt a connection not only to the woman but to the planet itself. It called to him, demanded something he could not yet name. The shadow approached, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The suns cast long streaks of colored light across the city, highlighting both the beauty and the threat. The traveler clenched his fists, feeling the mark on his chest burn. The energy flared, a faint glow spreading outward, as if reacting to the presence of the dark figure. The silver-haired woman lifted her hand again. This time her gesture was more urgent, almost pleading. He understood in a way beyond words that she was offering guidance, protection, and a challenge all at once. The choice was his: to face the unknown, embrace the power stirring within him, or to retreat into safety and lose the chance to understand, to connect, to survive. He stepped forward, the shadow halted, the energy in his chest pulsed like a drumbeat, strong and relentless. He could feel the pulse moving through him, through his veins, through his very being. It was alive, it was aware, and it had chosen him. The silver-haired woman's eyes shone with an emotion he could not name. Hope, fear, longing, all intertwined. For the first time, he felt that this world was not only dangerous and beautiful, but also full of possibility. He realized that his journey had only just begun. Above, the three suns shifted in the sky, casting overlapping shadows and light across the city. The traveler felt the air vibrate with unseen energy, as though the planet itself were breathing around him. Somewhere far below, he thought he heard a whisper carried by the wind. "You are here, the choice is yours." And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the silver-haired woman vanished. The shadow receded into darkness. The city lay silent once more. The pulse in his chest remained, steady and insistent. The traveler stood alone on the edge of the platform, staring at the vast, three-colored horizon. His heart pounded, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and wonder. He knew with certainty that his life, and perhaps the fate of the three-sun planet, was now tied to forces beyond his comprehension. Somewhere in the depths of the Crystal City, something was awakening, something that had been waiting for him. And in that instant, the traveler realized he was no longer merely a visitor. He was a part of the world now. The first part of his journey had ended, but the true challenge, the mystery of the women, the shadow, and the pulse of energy, was only beginning. And as the three suns dipped behind the horizon, casting the city in a final, surreal glow, he knew that he could not turn back. The three-sun planet had claimed him. The traveler woke to a light that was not familiar, yet not entirely alien. The three suns had risen in their own rhythm, casting amber, white, and violet rays across the city. Their light danced on the floating platforms, shifting with the wind and reflecting in the crystal towers. The pulse in his chest throbbed in response, steady but insistent. as if reminding him that the mark he had received yesterday was not a warning, it was a summons. He stepped carefully across the bridge to the nearest platform, his boots clicking against the smooth surface. The air shimmered with energy, carrying faint echoes of voices or thoughts he could not yet understand. Every step he took seemed to hum, responding to the energy that flowed within him. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he saw a figure moving along the edge of a platform, her hair shining like silver threads in the three-colored light. It was her, the woman who had first marked him. She paused and turned her eyes toward him. The intensity of her gaze was almost unbearable. For a moment he felt exposed, as if she could see every secret thought, every fear, every longing he had tried to hide, even from himself. He took a deep breath and called out, his voice small but firm. I don't understand." "Who are you?" The woman did not respond. Instead, she extended her hand toward him, not in invitation, but in challenge. The air between them seemed to ripple, and he felt the pulse in his chest react, stronger now, like a drumbeat echoing through his veins. It was both thrilling and terrifying. As he hesitated, other figures appeared. Dozens of women, each radiant in her own way, moved silently along the platforms. Some watched him curiously, others with caution, and a few with expressions that suggested power and authority beyond comprehension. They did not speak, yet their presence filled him with an emotion he could not name, a mixture of awe, desire, and fear. The silver-haired woman stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. Slowly, she moved her hand in a pattern that felt like an unspoken message. He followed her gestures, learning instinctively that movement and intention here were as powerful as words. She led him across the platforms, gliding effortlessly while he struggled to keep pace. Eventually, they arrived at the base of a massive crystal palace. Its walls shimmered with light, reflecting the colors of the three suns in patterns that seemed to shift and change, almost alive. The traveler's pulse quickened. He had never seen a building that felt so alive, so aware of him and his presence. The woman stopped at the entrance and turned toward him. She raised her hand, and the light around the palace shifted, opening a doorway that had not been visible before. Within, he glimpsed corridors lined with crystalline pillars, glowing softly, and strange symbols carved into the walls. They pulsed with the same rhythm as his own heartbeat. Inside, the palace was vast, more enormous than he could have imagined. Every corridor, every chamber seemed to hum with energy. He felt both exhilaration and dread. There were shadows moving beneath the light, too quick to see, yet he sensed their presence. He realized this palace was not just a building, it was alive, and it was testing him. The silver-haired woman led him to a chamber at the heart of the palace. The walls glowed faintly, illuminating the carved symbols that lined them. The air was thick with energy, and the pulse in his chest resonated in response, stronger now, almost overwhelming. She stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with a strange mix of curiosity and caution. Slowly, she reached out, placing her hand near his chest, above the mark that glowed faintly. A wave of energy passed between them, not painful but intense. The traveler gasped, feeling memories, emotions, and visions he had never experienced. He saw the palace as it had been centuries ago, filled with life and light, and then he saw shadows creeping in, twisting and corrupting everything. He understood, without words, that the women were guardians of a power that had been threatened for centuries. They were bound to the palace, to the planet, and to each other by a magic older than time itself. Their duty was to protect this energy, to maintain the balance between light and shadow. The silver-haired woman withdrew her hand. Her gaze softened slightly, and for the first time the traveler sensed vulnerability beneath her strength. She turned and moved toward a balcony overlooking the city. He followed, curiosity pulling him forward. From the balcony, he saw the city stretched beneath them like a tapestry of light and shadow. The three suns cast long streaks across the floating platforms, illuminating some areas while leaving others in deep violet shadows. He could feel the pulse of energy from the planet itself, responding to the women, to him, and to something far beyond his understanding. "You are not like the others," the silver-haired woman finally spoke, her voice low but resonant. He did not understand the words fully, yet their meaning was clear. She sensed his difference, his potential, and the danger that both carried and attracted him. The traveler nodded, unsure what to say. Words felt small here, inadequate for the presence and power surrounding him. Suddenly, a ripple passed through the air. Shadows moved across the city below, dark shapes detaching from the platforms, moving with intent and hunger. The silver-haired woman's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm, grounding him. "They are awake," she said, not with fear but with recognition, "and they seek more than what they were given." He followed her gaze, feeling a chill despite the sun's warmth. The shadows moved with purpose, and he realized they were not mere darkness. They were remnants of a power that had once been free, now corrupted and restless. The silver-haired woman turned to him. "You must choose," she said. "To understand, you must follow. To survive, you must learn. To touch what lies beyond, you must trust not just me, but yourself." The traveler felt the pulse in his chest respond to her words, stronger, insistent. It was as if the mark was alive, urging him forward, compelling him to step into the unknown. He took a deep breath and nodded. He had no choice. This world, the women, the pulse of energy, they had claimed him. The journey was his to continue, and he felt the weight of that responsibility pressing on him like a tangible force. She extended her hand again, and this time he took it. The pulse of energy surged, flooding his senses. He saw visions of the crystal forests, the floating platforms, and the city alive with movement. He saw the alien women, their strength, their beauty, and their sorrow. He understood in a fragment of a moment that their lives were bound by duty, by sacrifice, and by something far older and more powerful than himself. And yet, he felt a connection, a fragile, tenuous link that held the promise of understanding, perhaps even of companionship. As they moved deeper into the palace, he realized that every corridor, every chamber, every shimmer of light was a test. The palace responded to his thoughts, his emotions, his courage. Some passages opened, welcoming him. Others remained closed, revealing only shadows that whispered of danger. He felt both fear and exhilaration. He was human, limited in experience and understanding, yet here he was, moving among beings whose very presence shaped reality. Every step was a lesson, every glance a challenge, every heartbeat a test. Hours or perhaps moments passed, and he lost track of time. The palace was infinite yet contained, a paradox like the planet itself. He felt the pull of the silver-haired woman beside him, guiding him without words, teaching him through gestures, through shared glances, through the subtle flow of energy that seemed to respond to his own. And then they reached a chamber unlike any other. It was circular, with a ceiling that opened to the sky. The three suns shone directly above, their light intersecting to form a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the walls. In the center, a pedestal of crystal glowed faintly, humming with power. The silver-haired woman stepped forward and placed her hands above the pedestal. The energy pulsed, reaching out, touching both of them. The traveler felt a pull not of fear but of inevitability. The mark on his chest flared, connecting him to the pedestal, to her, to the planet itself. "You are ready," she said softly. "But readiness does not mean understanding. What comes next will test not only your strength but your heart." Before he could respond, a sound echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonant hum like the voice of the planet itself. Shadows swirled at the edges of the room, darker than the violet light, moving with intent and intelligence. The traveler stepped back instinctively, feeling both awe and dread. The silver-haired woman turned, her expression a mixture of caution and hope. "They are coming," she said, "and they will test everything we have built." The pedestal flared, casting long, shifting shadows across the chamber. The pulse in his chest surged violently, responding to the approaching force. The traveler realized that his journey had entered a new phase, a phase where understanding, trust, and courage would be pushed to their limits. And then, without warning, a shadow detached from the swirling darkness and moved toward him, taller and more defined than any he had seen. Its presence was both terrifying and fascinating. It reached toward him, not with malice but with intent. The silver-haired woman placed her hand on his chest, grounding him once more, her eyes locked with his, filled with unspoken meaning. "Do not falter," she whispered. "The choice is yours." The traveler felt the pulse in his chest flare one final time as the shadow drew near. He realized that this was only the beginning. The planet, the women, the energy, they were not merely mysteries to observe. They demanded participation, courage, and sacrifice. And as the shadow's form grew clearer, moving closer with silent intent, the traveler understood with sudden clarity. The world he had entered was alive, and it had already chosen him. The traveler could feel the pulse in his chest throbbing faster than ever. The shadow that had moved toward him in the palace chamber now hovered at the edge of the light, twisting and coiling like smoke caught in a storm. The silver-haired woman stood close beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm, her eyes burning with quiet intensity. "They are the remnants," she whispered, her voice low but steady. "Remnants of what was lost long ago." He turned to look at her, confusion and fear mingling in his chest. "Remnants of what?" he asked, but she did not answer with words. Instead, she led him through the chamber, past the glowing pedestal, and toward a corridor that seemed older, darker, yet pulsing faintly with light. The walls here were different. Crystals lined them, yes, but they were duller, scratched with carvings that seemed older than the city itself. Symbols twisted and spiraled, not in decorative patterns, but in shapes that suggested stories, tales of power, of sacrifice, of fear. He traced them with his fingers, and as he did, the pulse in his chest flared again, stronger this time, as if responding to recognition. "The curse," she said finally, her voice echoing in the chamber. "This planet carries it. Every one of us, every generation, has lived with it. It binds the energy of life here to shadows that will never fully sleep." He paused. "A curse? What kind of curse?" Her eyes darkened, not with anger, but with sorrow. "It is not simple. It is older than the first building of this city. It grows stronger whenever life seeks freedom, whenever desire seeks connection. Outsiders, those who are not bound by the rules of this place, are most at risk. It feeds on longing, on fear, on mistakes." The traveler felt a cold shiver run through him. The pulse in his chest had never felt more real. He realized that it was more than a mark. It was a connection, a tether linking him to the curse itself. She turned to him then, her silver hair falling over one shoulder, catching the three suns' light. "When you touched me before, you awakened more than your own curiosity. The curse recognized you. It sees the energy in you, and it tests you now. It is not evil, but it is relentless. It does not forgive weakness." He swallowed, feeling a mixture of fear and fascination. "How do I survive it?" "You must understand it," she said, "and you must choose. Each choice will change you. Every moment is a test. And above all," she paused, her gaze locking onto his, intense and unwavering, "you must not let it control your heart." They moved deeper into the palace, and the corridor opened into a vast chamber. This place was unlike any other he had seen. The ceiling was impossibly high, fading into darkness, and the walls were lined with thousands of crystals, each one glowing faintly, humming with energy. The floor was smooth, but he could see faint lines tracing shapes that seemed almost alive, shifting slightly as he stepped. "Here," she said, leading him to the center. A single crystal rose from the ground, larger than any he had seen, its surface rippling like liquid silver. "This is the heart of the curse. It is the origin of the shadow's power. It remembers everything, every mistake, every longing, every soul that has ever been touched by this planet." The traveler felt a pull, almost magnetic, drawing him toward the crystal. The pulse in his chest flared violently. He hesitated, remembering her warning. The energy was tempting, powerful, overwhelming, but he knew that touching it recklessly could consume him. She stepped closer, placing her hand near his, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "The curse can bind you," she said softly, "or it can teach you. But it is not forgiving. You must be careful, and you must be brave." He took a deep breath and stepped closer to the crystal. The moment he reached out, visions filled his mind. He saw the city as it had been centuries ago, alive with energy, glowing under the three suns. He saw the alien women in their prime, radiant and powerful, bound to protect the energy of the planet. And then he saw shadows creeping in, twisting and corrupting everything they touched. Pain, loss, and fear flowed through the visions. He felt the sorrow of the women, trapped by duty, longing for freedom, for connection, for a life beyond the curse. And in the midst of all of it, he saw himself, not yet born, not yet arrived, watching the events unfold, his future intertwined with this place. He gasped, staggering back. The pulse in his chest surged violently, and he felt the energy of the planet pressing against him, testing him. I don't understand," he whispered. The silver-haired woman placed her hand on his shoulder. "You will," she said. "But understanding comes with risk. You cannot avoid it. The curse watches, waits, and challenges. It does not forgive weakness, but it can recognize courage if you show it." As she spoke, a movement at the edge of the chamber caught his eye. Shadows had gathered, coalescing into forms more distinct than before. They moved silently, circling, watching, testing. Their presence was both terrifying and mesmerizing. He could feel the pulse in his chest reacting to them, flaring and ebbing with every subtle movement. "You see them," she said. "They are not evil. They are the remnants of the energy's corruption. They exist because the curse cannot be fully broken. They test every being who enters this place. They will test you." He swallowed hard, fear and excitement mingling. "What do I do?" "Face them," she said simply, "but not with strength alone, with heart, with mind, with understanding, and above all, do not lose yourself." The traveler nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had crossed the stars, survived countless dangers, and yet this challenge felt greater than anything he had faced. He could not rely on strength alone. He had to understand, to feel, to connect, and perhaps to trust. The shadows moved closer, and he could see shapes within them, vague but recognizably humanoid. They circled the pedestal, moving in patterns that seemed deliberate, intelligent. He realized that each step he took would be judged, each thought he held examined. The silver-haired woman stepped beside him, placing her hand near his chest again. The pulse in his chest flared at her presence, a mixture of comfort and warning. "Do not falter," she whispered. "They will try to unbalance you, to tempt you. They will show fear, loss, longing. You must hold on to yourself. Only then can you hope to understand and survive." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He felt the energy around him, felt the pulse in his chest, felt the presence of the shadowy figures circling him. He let himself focus not on fear but on understanding. He let himself feel the sorrow of the women, the history of the city, the power of the planet itself. And then he stepped forward. The shadows reacted immediately. They surged toward him, shapes twisting and stretching, forming faces and hands that seemed to reach for him. He could feel the energy brushing against his skin, testing, probing, searching for weakness. He wavered for a moment, but the silver-haired woman's gaze held him. She did not intervene, she only watched, her eyes steady, her presence a guide rather than a shield. He focused not on fighting but on sensing, on understanding. The pulse in his chest flared brightly, a beacon of connection. The shadows recoiled, then shifted, flowing around him rather than attacking. He could sense their intent. They were testing him, not destroying him. As he moved closer to the pedestal, the energy of the crystal responded. It pulsed, reaching out toward him, entwining with the mark on his chest. The shadows hesitated, circling, uncertain. He realized that the connection he had begun to form with the silver-haired woman and the planet itself was stronger than their fear, their corruption. For a brief, shining moment, he felt clarity. He understood that the curse was not only a danger, it was a challenge, a test, and perhaps even a teacher. The energy of the planet, the shadows, and the women were all part of the same living, breathing system, one that demanded courage, empathy, and understanding. And then, without warning, a new presence entered the chamber. Taller, darker than the others, moving with intent and authority, the shadows bowed slightly, recognizing it, and the pulse in his chest surged violently. The silver-haired woman's eyes widened slightly. "It has come," she said, her voice tense. "The source of the corruption. It will test you harder than anything else." The traveler's heart pounded. He felt the weight of every choice he had made, every step he had taken on this planet, pressing down on him. The energy in his chest flared once more, and he realized with sudden clarity, the challenge was only beginning. The curse was not simply a legend, it was alive, and it had set its sights on him. He looked at the silver-haired woman, and in her eyes he saw not fear but determination. "I will not fail," he whispered, more to himself than to her. She placed her hand over his once more, and the pulse in his chest surged in response, connecting them, linking him to the planet, to the shadows, and to the challenge that awaited. And as the dark presence moved closer, the chamber seemed to contract and expand at once, alive with power and intent. He understood that his journey was no longer about curiosity or survival alone. It was about understanding, transformation, and the choices that would define not only him, but the fate of the three-sun planet. The shadows coiled around the pedestal. The dark presence advanced. The pulse in his chest flared violently. And in that moment, the traveler realized that the world he had entered was far more dangerous, beautiful, and mysterious than he had ever imagined. The dark presence lingered at the edge of the chamber, its form shifting and coiling like smoke in the wind. The shadows bowed to it, circling him and the silver-haired woman with an unsettling reverence. The traveler felt the pulse in his chest flare violently, as if warning him of danger far greater than anything he had faced before. The silver-haired woman stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "It is the core of the corruption," she said softly. "It was born from the curse itself. It will test not only your strength, but your heart." He swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. "Then we face it together?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the three suns above. For a moment he thought he saw doubt flicker across her features, but it vanished almost instantly. "Together," she said. The dark presence surged forward, its form solidifying into a tall, shadowed figure. It radiated power, and the energy in the chamber thrummed violently in response. The traveler felt the pulse in his chest react, the mark burning like a flame. This was not just a battle of strength, it was a battle of will, of understanding, of trust. The silver-haired woman raised her hand, and the energy around her coalesced into shimmering threads of light. She did not strike, but the light created a barrier, protective and flexible. "Do not rush," she whispered. "The shadows respond to fear, they feed on doubt. You must remain steady." The traveler took a deep breath and focused on the pulse within him. The mark had grown brighter since he had entered the chamber, and he realized that it was not a curse upon him. It was a connection. If he learned to control it, to listen to it, he could harness its power. The dark presence extended a hand, and the shadows surged, swirling around the traveler like a storm. He felt their force pressing against him, probing, testing, seeking weakness. Panic rose within him, but he recalled her words, "Do not let it control your heart." He clenched his fists, grounding himself, and the pulse in his chest flared in response, forming a protective aura. For a moment, the shadows recoiled. He could feel their hesitation. They were testing him, yes, but they were also aware of the connection he shared with the silver-haired woman. The bond between them created a tension that even the shadows could not ignore. "You are stronger than you realize," she whispered, her hand resting lightly on his chest. "But strength alone will not be enough. You must understand and you must trust." He nodded, focusing on the energy flowing through him. He could feel it now, not as a burden, but as a part of him. The shadows pressed forward again, but this time he met them with calm, observing their movements, learning their rhythm. With each step, each movement, he began to anticipate, to flow with their intent rather than resist it blindly. The dark presence hissed, a sound like wind through broken glass, and surged closer. It moved with intelligence, striking at his mind as well as his body, attempting to overwhelm him with visions of failure, loss, and fear. The traveler faltered, stumbling back, but the silver-haired woman's hand held him steady. "Focus on the truth within you," she urged. "The shadows can deceive, but they cannot touch your heart if you do not let them." He closed his eyes, feeling the pulse in his chest sink with his breathing. He imagined the energy not as a threat, but as a bridge, between himself and the planet, between himself and the women, between himself and the unknown. The shadows swirled closer, but this time he reached out, not with anger, not with fear, but with intention. The energy of the mark flared, forming threads of light that reached toward the shadows. They recoiled, twisting and shivering under his influence. For the first time he understood. He could interact with the darkness, not to destroy it, but to balance it. The silver-haired woman watched him, her eyes filled with pride and something deeper, something that made his chest tighten. Their connection was more than guidance, it was trust, fragile and profound. But then something unexpected happened. One of the other alien women appeared at the edge of the chamber. She was radiant, but her eyes held something cold, calculating. She moved quickly, her light sharp and precise, striking at the threads connecting the traveler to the shadows. "Stop!" the silver-haired woman shouted, but it was too late. The newcomer's strike disrupted the balance, and the shadows surged violently. The traveler stumbled, the pulse in his chest flaring painfully. He felt energy twisting inside him, almost beyond control. The dark presence hissed with satisfaction, feeding on the chaos. The silver-haired woman moved to confront the newcomer, but the traveler's attention was split. He realized with sudden shock that not all the women were aligned. Some sought to control, to manipulate, to test in ways that were cruel rather than instructive. He had trusted too easily. "This is a test," he whispered to himself, grounding himself again. The mark on his chest flared, brighter than ever. He reached out with his awareness, seeking connection, seeking balance. The threads of light resisted, but slowly began to weave through the chaos, threading the shadows and the energy around him into a fragile harmony. The silver-haired woman fought with grace and power, her light cutting through the interference, but the newcomer was skilled. They clashed, creating bursts of energy that sent ripples through the chamber. The traveler realized that he had a choice, to flee, to hide, or to act. He chose action. Focusing entirely on the pulse in his chest, he extended his awareness outward, feeling the energy not as a weapon but as a force of balance. The shadows, the dark presence, the interference of the other woman, they all responded. The energy of the mark flared and twisted, weaving into a pattern that calmed the chaos. The dark presence recoiled, surprised by the traveler's sudden mastery. The newcomer faltered as well, stepping back, her expression a mixture of frustration and curiosity. She vanished suddenly, leaving only the faint shimmer of light where she had stood. The silver-haired woman exhaled, relief flooding her features. "You have learned," she said softly. "You have taken the first step toward controlling not only your power but your heart. But the trials are not over." The traveler's chest still throbbed violently from the exertion, but he felt a thrill of accomplishment. He had faced fear, chaos, and betrayal, and survived. But he knew that the balance was fragile and the curse was still very much alive. The silver-haired woman led him to a chamber at the top of the palace. From here, they could see the city stretched below, glittering under the three suns. Floating platforms shimmered, rivers of light twisted and turned, and shadows moved beneath, lurking at the edges. "You must understand this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The curse is not only a force of destruction, it is a mirror, it reflects what is inside you. Fear, doubt, longing, desire, they all shape the way it interacts with you. Control your heart and you control the curse. Lose your heart and it consumes you." He nodded, understanding more deeply than before. The challenge was not simply to survive the shadows or the corruption. It was to understand himself, to confront his own fears and desires, to remain steadfast even in the face of betrayal. She stepped closer, her silver hair glowing softly in the light of the suns. Their hands brushed and the pulse in his chest flared again. This time it was warm, comforting, almost like a promise. He realized that their bond was not just guidance, it was connection, fragile and profound, something he had never known before. And yet the memory of the other woman lingered. Her interference had been precise, calculated, and it left a lingering sense of unease. Not all the guardians were allies. Some would seek to challenge him, perhaps even harm him to test their own strength, or perhaps to satisfy motives he could not yet understand. The silver-haired woman's gaze met his. "You must be ready," she said. "The true challenge is coming. What you have faced so far is only the beginning. The curse will not forgive weakness, and there are those among my people who will seek to use it for their own ends." He felt a chill despite the warmth of the suns. The palace, the shadows, the curse. It was all alive, responding to his every thought and emotion. He understood with sudden clarity that his journey would not be simple. Every step, every choice would have consequences not just for him, but for the women, for the city, and perhaps for the planet itself. A deep rumble shook the chamber. Shadows twisted violently at the edges of the light, responding to something he could not yet see. The pulse in his chest flared once more, urgent and insistent. The silver-haired woman took his hand firmly. "We must prepare," she said. "The next test will be unlike anything you have faced. It will challenge your strength, your mind, and your heart. And you will not face it alone, but you may find that even allies are not always what they seem." The traveler felt the weight of her words pressing on him. The city stretched below, beautiful and dangerous, alive with energy and shadow. He knew that he could not retreat. He could not hide. The pulse in his chest reminded him that he was bound to this place, to the women, and to the challenge that awaited. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the palace, he sensed a presence waiting. It was older, stronger, and more cunning than anything he had faced before. The pulse in his chest flared violently as if warning him. The silver-haired woman's hand tightened around his. "Trust yourself," she said. "Trust the bond we share. But do not forget, your choices will shape more than your destiny. They will shape the fate of the three-sun planet itself." The traveler took a deep breath, feeling the pulse in his chest calm slightly, syncing with his own heartbeat. He looked at her, and in her eyes he saw determination, hope, and something that felt like longing. The chamber shimmered under the three suns, shadows twisting at the edges. The pulse flared once more, and he understood that the moment of truth was coming. The curse was alive. The shadows were moving, and the true test, one that would challenge everything he had learned, was about to begin. The chamber trembled beneath the power of the three-sun planet. Shadows twisted violently, swirling in impossible shapes, while the pulse in the traveler's chest flared with urgency, like the heartbeat of the world itself. At the center of the storm stood the dark presence, tall, coiling, and full of a terrible intelligence. It radiated a cold, consuming energy that seemed to reach into his very soul. The silver-haired woman stood beside him, her hand brushing against his. Their connection was steady, a tether of light in the chaos. "This is the moment," she whispered, her eyes shining with both fear and determination. "Face it, not with anger, not with fear, face it with your heart." The traveler inhaled deeply. Every choice, every test, every moment of doubt had led to this point. He could feel the energy of the planet, of the curse, of the shadows, and even of the alien women pulsing through him. It was no longer a threat, it was a part of him. A part he could understand, a part he could guide. He stepped forward and the dark presence surged toward him. Shadows coiled around its form, striking at him with sharp, almost tangible tendrils of energy. But he did not flinch. Instead, he focused inward, feeling the pulse in his chest, the mark that had connected him to this world. He reached out not to attack, but to balance. The energy responded. Threads of light extended from him, reaching into the chaos, weaving the shadows into patterns that bent and shifted without breaking. The dark presence hissed, twisting violently, but it could not break the connection. For the first time, it recoiled, uncertain and wary. The silver-haired woman raised her hands, her light joining his. Together, their energy intertwined, forming a bridge between the darkness and the planet, between the shadows and the life that remained uncorrupted. The traveler realized that the curse was not simply evil, it was a mirror. It reflected fear, doubt, and longing, but it could also reflect courage, hope, and love. The shadows pulsed violently, but slowly they began to respond. They no longer lashed blindly. They moved in patterns, flowing around him and the woman, no longer seeking to destroy, but to test, to challenge, to awaken understanding. The dark presence howled, a sound like thunder breaking over a crystal valley, and surged once more. The traveler closed his eyes, feeling every heartbeat, every thread of energy, every pulse of the planet. He let go of fear, let go of doubt, and embraced the bond he shared with the silver-haired woman, with the city, and with the planet itself. When he opened his eyes, he reached out toward the presence, not with weapon, not with anger, but with understanding. Light flowed from him, intertwining with the darkness. He could feel its fear, its sorrow, its longing. It had once been part of the planet's energy, corrupted and twisted by neglect, by fear, by separation. Now he could guide it, help it find balance. The dark presence recoiled, then shivered, shrinking slightly as the threads of light wove through it. The shadows followed, twisting, bending, and finally settling into shapes that shimmered instead of searing. The chamber's trembling slowed, the energy stabilizing as the suns cast their three-colored light across the walls. The traveler felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by exhaustion. The pulse in his chest still glowed, but it was steady now, in harmony with the rhythm of the planet. He had survived, yes, but more importantly, he had transformed. He understood the curse, and in understanding it, he had begun to heal it. The silver-haired woman's hand tightened around his. "You have done it," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "You faced the curse, and you did not break. You are stronger than I ever imagined." He looked at her, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel fully. The weight of fear he had carried, the longing he had tried to ignore, the bond that had grown between them. The pulse of energy in his chest reflected all of it, a living testament to the trials they had faced together. "But it is not just strength," she said, stepping closer. Her eyes shone with warmth and something deeper. "It is your heart. You faced what most could not. And because of that, this world, we have hope." The traveler exhaled, a smile breaking across his face despite exhaustion. He felt lighter, freer, and yet bound in a way he had never known. The bond with her, the connection to the planet, the understanding of the curse, it was all part of him now. They stepped toward the balcony overlooking the city. From here, the three-sun planet was breathtaking. The floating platforms shimmered in gold, silver, and violet. Rivers of light twisted through the city like flowing crystals. Shadows no longer threatened but lingered like silent guardians, balanced and harmonious. The energy of the planet pulsed gently, responsive to life, not destructive. For a moment they stood in silence, simply observing. The silver-haired woman placed her hand lightly on his chest, over the mark. He felt the pulse sync with hers, a rhythm that spoke of trust, understanding, and something more. "You have changed it," she said softly. Not only the curse, but yourself, and in doing so, you have changed me as well." He looked into her eyes, seeing vulnerability and strength intertwined, the reflection of his own journey. "I couldn't have done it alone," he admitted. "You guided me, trusted me, even when the shadows threatened to consume us." She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and emotion. "We guided each other," she said. "That is the truth, and now we can move forward." As they looked out over the city, the traveler felt the full weight of transformation. He had arrived as an outsider, curious and cautious, and now he was part of this world, part of its energy, part of its story. He realized that the journey had not been about survival alone. It had been about connection, trust, courage, and the willingness to confront the deepest fears within himself. The silver-haired woman stepped closer, her light blending with his. The pulse in his chest flared once more, warm and steady, a sign that the bond they shared was more than momentary. It was enduring, a bridge between them, a reflection of hope and understanding. But even as relief washed over him, he sensed the faintest stirrings of new energy in the distance. The planet was alive, after all. Its energy was vast and ancient, and while the curse had been tempered, it was not gone entirely. The pulse in his chest reminded him that vigilance, courage, and understanding would always be required. The silver-haired woman placed her hand on his, looking into his eyes. "The world is vast," she said softly, "and there are still mysteries beyond these walls. But whatever comes, we face it together." He nodded, feeling the weight of her words, together. The word carried a warmth, a promise, and a sense of belonging he had never known. The pulse in his chest glowed gently, echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat, echoing the rhythm of the planet. A soft wind stirred in the chamber, carrying whispers of the city below. The floating platforms shimmered under the three suns, casting long streaks of amber, silver, and violet across the crystal towers. Life had returned, balanced and vibrant. The shadows lingered, but now they were guardians rather than threats. The traveler took a deep breath, feeling the vastness of the three-sun planet, the depth of the curse he had faced, and the bond he shared with the silver-haired woman. He realized that transformation was not simply about power. It was about understanding, compassion, courage, and trust. She looked at him then, a faint smile on her lips, her silver hair glowing in the sunlight. "You came here as a stranger," she said softly, "and now you are part of this world, part of me, part of the future we will shape together." He reached for her hand, feeling the pulse of energy between them solidify, warm and steady. "And I will stay," he said. "Not just to face challenges, but to be here, to be part of what we create, to protect this world and all of you." Her eyes shone with emotion, and for the first time he allowed himself to feel fully the joy, the relief, the connection, and a profound sense of belonging. The pulse in his chest matched hers perfectly now, a living symbol of trust, courage, and shared purpose. Together they stepped onto the balcony, looking down at the city they had saved, the shadows that had been balanced, and the three suns that shone above. The energy of the planet pulsed gently, alive but calm, a reflection of the bond and understanding they had forged. The traveler understood then that this was not the end. Life on the three-sun planet would always hold challenges, mysteries, and tests. But he had learned to face them, not with fear but with courage, not with anger but with understanding, not alone but with someone who had become more than a guide, someone who had become a part of him. The silver-haired woman turned to him, her hand still in his, her eyes shining. "The curse is not gone entirely," she said softly, "but it has been tempered, and together we can face whatever comes next." He nodded, feeling the pulse of energy in his chest, steady and alive, echoing not only the planet but the bond they shared. Together they had transformed the world and themselves. And as the three suns climbed higher in the sky, casting golden, silver, and violet light across the crystal city, the traveler realized that he had found what he had been seeking all along: connection, understanding, courage, and a place where his heart truly belonged. The three-sun planet had tested him, marked him, and transformed him. And in doing so, it had shown him the power of trust, of love, and of redemption. Together, he and the silver-haired woman stood, hand in hand, ready to face the future, whatever it might bring. The pulse of energy within him flared one last time, steady, strong, and filled with hope. The planet, the women, the shadows, all were alive and all were now in harmony. The journey had ended, but their story, together, was only beginning.